No, it was. Oh, I said state photo. It wasn't a state photo. I think it would have been in the architecture. The architecture one.
Okay, and that completes your...
Oh, no, I'm going to... A few more slides here. Just quickly going through the other different types of projects here. Transit management and parking management. Call center for demand response services. This, again, the lead agency here would be ACT. I should have mentioned that too. The bold agency over here to the right would be the lead agency for each of these projects. So regional ITS procurement, coordination. I think we changed this up yesterday. This isn't going to be Stratford and RPC. This is going to be more of Coast and UNH, more of a transit-led effort. Coast TSP, Transit Signal Priority Implementation. This, again, it's going to be more of a medium to maybe long-term project, just because there's some state legislation that I believe prohibits this right now. So I don't know how you might be going about changing that, but
we're not exactly sure yet. But we talk about all these things, and we actually had an opportunity in Dover to jump onto a project and come to find out, it's not legal in New Hampshire to do transit signal prioritization. So, so now we have to work on legislation to allow that to actually happen. So just some of those hurdles you come along as you get into this.
So yeah, we wanted to keep it in the plan, but it might not be as near term as maybe we thought it might be. So, but nevertheless, we'll keep it in the plan. Real-time transit information.
Yes.
I just wondered, why was it illegal? I'm confused about that.
There's specific legislation to who has the ability to control a signal in the state of New Hampshire. And that is exclusive to the New Hampshire DOT or your local municipal DPW workers. So if a bus is going to actually control a signal in some way, it's illegal. You can't do it. Technically, you could argue that a fire, and I think there's also an emergency vehicle exception for safety. But so it's exclusive to those uses or groups.
What's the overall reason why they don't want you to control it?
I don't think that any of this was written, any of these laws were put into place when we had really these as realistic options. So it was more, we don't want somebody tampering with our signals, probably, back when that was enacted.
Yeah. Okay, Dan?
Yep. All right. And yeah, of course, the real-time transit information. This has since been broken out into two projects here because it seems like UNH might be a little ahead of the game, more so than Coast right now. They, of course, have that CMAQ project, which I believe they're just waiting on a notice to proceed for them to acquire this technology. But we're going to break that up into one for UNH and one for Coast. UNH being more of the short term, Coast being more of the medium or possibly long term. And park and ride ITS improvements. This was something we talked about and thought that it was important to have in here. Just having surveillance cameras, parking sensors, and signage at park and ride facilities. It's hopefully this would help encourage people to use park and rides a little bit better if they know that a park and ride has space available, and they're not going to go there fighting for a spot or having to illegally park like they do in Portsmouth a lot of the times. But having some technologies just to let people know if there are spaces available would definitely be a benefit. Continuing, multimodal management, emergency management. And this was a focus on Route 1, a little corridor management study to basically assess the corridor in the event that, thinking about evacuation, corridor management. Yeah, it's basically a corridor study for Route 1. They've started some of this work. They wanted to call it out and focus more of it on ITS rather than that broad level corridor study. So basically a corridor study devoted to ITS on Route 1. We decided yesterday that DOT probably wouldn't be the lead. It would probably be RPC, Rockingham, who would take the lead on this corridor study. Regional 511 interface study. Seeing how municipalities and possibly the planning commissions as well could help to feed information into the 511 system, but also extract information out of that 511 system. Let's see, emergency management down here, the 2 projects, evacuation ITS improvements. Again, this would be region-wide, but we thought it was important to call out Seabrook in this, the Seabrook Station mainly because of the nuclear power plant, and it seemed logical to have them as part of the evacuation ITS improvements for the region. Route 4 incident reporting, again, this is U.S. Route 4, not State Route 4. So deploying signage and making sure that those technologies feed back into the state 511 system.
Can we go back one?
Absolutely.
This says multimodal management and emergency management. I don't see anything about multimodal in there.
Well, it's again, it's indirectly multimodal. I mean, you're setting up like this one right here. This corridor management study would be taking into account things like not only signal coordination but transit signal priority along that route too. So you're not just thinking of passenger vehicles. There's also transit vehicles involved.
Right, but I mean, rail, for example, seems to me ought to be included somehow a little bit more explicitly in all of that.
Ken's right. That's simply not multimodal.
Well, again, we're talking about Route 1 here.
Still not multimodal.
How so?
By definition, if you're talking Route 1, you're talking one mode, highway. The modes are rail, air, pipeline, maritime.
Sure, but if you're talking about a route in particular, if you're talking multimodal for a route.
Not by any, except the definition. It is not multimodal. It's highway. It's one mode.
I mean, I don't have a problem with what's there. I just don't see how it fits under the multimodal category.
So maybe this would be better fit under traffic management?
Yes.
It seemed to me.
Which is where it started there originally, in that category.
Under multimodal or under traffic management?
Traffic management. I thought I heard that's what James said yesterday. It started over there.
Is rail an element that we should be considering in that topic? Because I think there has been discussion about, I think, the Hampton branch. I know that RPC is working hard to have DOT acquire the Hampton branch so that they can maintain that right of way for future rail use, and that would be basically along that corridor. Well, it's not on Route 1 exactly. That is something, that's a comment that we could certainly add to this and, incorporate rail into this.
A rail, bus, and park and ride kinds of things. It seems to me the kinds of things that would fall into that category.
Yeah.
When you say corridor, though, it's not just the road. It's everything in that transportation corridor.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how wide is the corridor? Does it include the rail line that goes up?
I'm not sure. I'm not very familiar with Route 1.
In parts of it, yeah, sure it would. I think that this is kind of an RPC versus an SRP strong point area. I would guess that they're trying to build on their Route 1 corridor study that they've already done and incorporate now an ITS element. And in that Route 1 corridor study, there's definitely park and rides. There's, I believe there's an element related to rail. So presumably this would attempt to tie all that in, maybe not written up quite the way that we might expect at this point. But that's my assumption, knowing what they've done with the Route 1 corridor study, which was, as my recollection is, it was multimodal corridor study.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't have the particulars on this. Again, it's outside of our region. I really haven't talked with Dave or Scott over at Rockingham about this, but
Perhaps you could just bring it to their attention.
Yeah,
Maybe the description needs to be improved to talk about the multimodal piece, or maybe it's more appropriate under a different category.
okay.
But if rail is an important element, we can definitely discuss that with them, and it would then stay in this, I believe. It just needs to be called out specifically.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Information management and communications. All right. We talked about the possibility of having some regional data warehouses, which what I understood as basically being regional 511 systems, which me and Dave were talking about at the meeting. Dave is the transportation planner over at Rockingham. We don't really see a big need for this if the state system is doing its job properly. We certainly see the need for sharing data, having some of that information that might be collected at some of these signals or other technologies that are out there. But having our own like 511 systems, we don't really see a big need for something like that. So we're going to keep these in the plan, but we're going to push them out into the long term and sort of mull them over a little bit more. But again, we think it's more important to just be coordinating better with DOT and making sure we get some of that information that they're expecting. So.
Wait, why is it called warehouse?
That's where I was going.
I mean, it sounds like you want to know where warehouses for Walmart are.
Sure. No, it's basically being a warehouse. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Granite, New Hampshire Granite.
Right.
It's a data warehouse.
Maybe you can
for
just
spatial data.
Okay. Part of what I get concerned about is we operate in our own little world, but there are other people who may take a look at all of this, and I'm just thinking that where we can be a little clearer and not use acronyms and be a little bit more explicit. So if it's data warehouse, maybe adding that, or maybe some other phraseology, because that just lends itself. Because I'm thinking, if somebody wanted a warehouse study to find out how trucks were moving around in a region, maybe that's something we're looking at, but that's not what you're talking about.
No, Ken, let me go further on that. Those descriptions have to do with standards and integration, not warehousing. So that's got to be resolved. That simply is incorrect.
Established data format, regional ITS data procurement system hardware. Okay, yeah, maybe it's a bad project title, and we can certainly revisit that. All right.
Dan?
Yes, Luke.
We finished taking those notes. Could you go on a teeny bit about bridge security surveillance? That was extent and the reason for it?
Sure. All right, so as the project description says, establish a video distribution system to allow authorized municipal and transit organizations to view bridge conditions in real time. So we're not talking about having this being publicly available. Most of the bridge security cameras that are out there are not, actually I don't think any of them are publicly available right now to view. Mainly DOT, maybe some local municipalities, but expanding those systems to some other bridges that might not have them. So I don't know if there are any specific
bridge
questions.
Security, it sounds like something you'd see on the Williamsburg Bridge in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Looking for people that would be interest in destroying the structure. And I was wondering, is that the situation here? And if so, what's the extent of the, are we looking at the bridges around in the Portsmouth area or other bridges? But, you know, what's the scope of this operation?
Bob may be able to answer this better than I can, but it's definitely a big Homeland Security push, and it isn't on all the bridges in the state. It's on the main bridges. So Little Bay Bridges is one that would definitely have security cameras, and the purpose of this would be sharing the information for incident management type things. Let's say there's an accident on the bridge and you need to get people there quickly. If local municipalities don't have access, they don't understand what the situation is, they can't respond as quickly to an incident on the bridge. So this would, it would really be specific to, Memorial Bridge would probably have some of this, all the major connectors, but, we're not talking about local small bridges. These are, on the interstate system pretty much, in the turnpike system, and then again, major connectors and, major assets for New Hampshire and Maine. I don't know if you have more to add.
I wouldn't have used the word major. Critical. We talked about the bridge between between Somersworth and Berwick, for instance. All right. If you go to Laconia, if you understand some of the utilities that are running under that bridge, they're not on major routes, but they're serious considerations. So from both an emergency management and a homeland security, they are becoming required pieces of information. If we had to evacuate, we certainly want to know what's going on some of these bridges. And with ITS and the signboards, we may have to redirect people off an originally proposed route to another route. But the only way you're going to know that is having real-time visibility.
Thank you.
And there is an incident management meeting for the Little Bay Bridges this week. So and we have the document in our office with the plan and all of the diagrams that show the different routes and who's responsible for which type of incident and who responds. So it's all very carefully orchestrated.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ed?
Who authorizes it and who protects the system from the outside so people don't get in and use the system against us?
Typically, that's DOT function. Public Works, DMV, DOT function within the state. In many states, the only communications backbone for a state is the DOT system. And that's no different than talking about banking or power distribution, all of those things. Hackers can get into anything. I mean, so you got to be careful when you say, how do you protect? But the essential control rests typically with the State Department of Transportation, despite what many people think law enforcement does not have routine access to any of that information. That's nationally, state by state by state. It's very unusual unless agreements have been made, and actually in most cases, if public safety wants access to some of that information, they have to pay for it because it's a cost to the supplying agency. Does that help answer that? I was going to suggest MM1 and MM2 in turn really support MM4. I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry.
IMC?
IMC.
Okay.
IMC1 and IMC2 really are the requirements that will allow you to reach IMC4. And I think you should indicate that relationship.
Okay. And again, the IMC4, for those who might not be able to read it, it's just the Seacoast region to the Transportation Management Center in Concord, setting up that infrastructure to get the ITS in this region communicating with the TMC in Concord.
Let me add on that just a little bit. A lot of people may not be. In this state, the only traffic management center is at the state level. In many states, that'd be at the county level, especially with higher populations. So the entire state transportation infrastructure is managed through the TMC, which is a Concord-based operation that has done an extremely good job overall.
I think our current infrastructure is a microwave transmission system. doesn't have a huge amount of bandwidth, but it's enough for what we need now. I think in the future they'd be moving to fiber optic cables or something with a little more capacity so that we could add more elements onto the ITS system.
Yeah, and last month, that's what Chris Wastruck from the
Yep.
Turnpike was showing us, was that backbone that they were trying to put in place. That was one of their projects.
And that's really the key to the whole ITS. You can have all these working in isolation, and they really you don't really get those benefits and efficiencies and safety and security out of the systems. But when you have them all connected through a backbone and working together, you can really start seeing some efficiencies and making the roads a lot more secure and safer for everybody using them.
Which brings up one last point, the criticality of broadband. We're not going to, I just wanted to raise that right here. If you're talking ITS, you can't forget the broadband aspect. And again, even in most states, they don't necessarily own every inch of the actual physical electronic infrastructure, if you will.
All right. So getting past the projects here, just some basic principles for prioritizing some of these projects. And again, it's not looking at individual projects, but rather those higher level categories, I guess you call them, the IMC, EM. Just some general principles that we identified. Of course, it's got to be consistent with the it doesn't say it there, but the needs in the regional ITS architecture, how responsive it is to those needs, are they multifunctional, of course, communication technologies, most of them are communication technologies anyway. Interjurisdictional, interregional, interstate coordination. Incremental deployments, and environmental benefits. Again, we just wanted to hit some of these major overarching principles that would help to shuffle these around in the grand scheme of things when we're starting to think about them for maybe our TIP or the 10-year plan.
A lot of these projects would be incorporated into other projects. Say we did, signal improvement or intersection improvement at some location. These ITS, I guess, physical pieces of infrastructure would be installed with the larger project. That's a way to get, I guess, reduce the cost a little bit of doing both projects independently and seeing the benefits from the ITS. So pretty much every traffic project out there these days has an ITS element that is included with it.
Was there, under your principles for prioritization, those are all sort of things that are good that you want to have happen. Was there any discussion about things that you want to avoid? So, for example, there's just a whole lot of discussion around a lot of this stuff dealing with privacy issues, and you could end up in a situation where it does a whole lot of good things, but the whole privacy thing kind of derails it because it can't avoid those kinds of issues. And I'm just thinking that one of the principles for prioritization might be that it has minimal privacy implications or something like that, so that we don't end up spinning our wheels on something only to be defeated because there are other problems that weren't associated with what it was trying to accomplish.
Sure. That's definitely something that we should include. Yeah, thanks.
And I would add, security of all this data that we're collecting.
Yeah, maybe privacy and security issues. For example, the whole microwave transmission thing may not be broadband, but I bet there aren't a whole lot of people that have the capability of picking up microwave transmissions in terms of from a communication standpoint.
Sure.
Just in general, does ITS provide measurement data? In other words, along providing information, real-time information and information for users. For instance, in the park and ride, does it track, say, how often the lot is full? I mean, that's certainly good information for your planning.
Some of the better systems, absolutely, yes. even some of the newer, more advanced signals that you see going in can actually capture turning movement data and count vehicles. And so yes, and having the systems in place where we can have access to that data is very important to us.
Yeah, for me, that was the big reason for having a regional data warehouse, is really that, having that turning movement, having that, those traffic counts, so we don't have to go out there and lay down, some tubes, have them maybe rip up, go do them again, and, really saves a lot of money in the long term if you can get, and beyond that, you can have, especially with signal coordination, once you have optical sensors on there that do these traffic counts, they can also eventually, there will be algorithms so that they're variable and they can, they understand what the traffic's doing and they can maximize the efficiency of the light patterns. And then, the environmental benefits and all the other benefits are there too, which is great.
Good deal.
Just curious, how's the parking ride data collected if there's not a light, not a signal?
No, yeah, that's a little tougher. They would have to install parking sensors basically in each parking space. It certainly
Is there
wouldn't.
like a camera or what kind of?
There are some manual ways of doing it, and I believe that's how they do it in Portsmouth right now. Is they have security cameras, and from the security camera they can basically count vehicles and count open spots. I don't know to what degree they actually enter in that data to some kind of database and actually track it. I don't
They
believe we
do
talked about
update
that,
their,
Jim.
in Portsmouth at the Park and Ride, they do have a variable message board up there kind of telling you which lots are full, because they have, 500 spots up by the main terminal and then another 500 down at the other terminal. And
Yeah, the airport has that too, so
Yep.
there's got to be technology out there
Yep.
that does that.
And it's done manually now, but there are programs out there that can, from a video feed, and the stuff is getting better all the time. It's just starting to become available, but able to identify, there's a vehicle there, there's an open spot there, and down the road it would be great to have this all automated so you could really increase the efficiency, and somebody could be at their home, look at their cell phone, and say, oh, there's parking spots today, I'm going to take the bus. So it's
Go ahead.
We just have to be willing to maintain it once we put it in place.
yes,
And
yes.
if that isn't something we've learned at Coast. So, sorry, I don't mean to be a wet blanket, but it costs money to maintain these things.
Listen to the hand, Bill.
We have this air show that's taking place at the end of May, or is it June?
June.
June, and first of July.
That's correct.
And so, all of these updates, are we going to be able to use any of these updates?
Bob, I know you're familiar about this. I believe last
I'm-
year compared to the year before, there was some major improvements.
Actually, they weren't terribly dissatisfied with what the management plans were the first year, but they were a disaster. We had no problems last year. We're anticipating about 60,000 people over 2 days. If you will remember, this past year, we started using ITS on 95 and 16, literally almost a month before the event, and there were no traffic problems whatsoever. The first year, I was working the show. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we had people who had left Massachusetts at 7 in the morning and didn't get onto that base until afternoon time. Traffic was backed up into Massachusetts on 95. I'm trying to give you the historical on it. As I say, we're anticipating 60,000 people roughly over 2 days. Nobody sees any problems, and that is because we have ITS up and running. And that whole idea was those messages started flashing in 2011, roughly 4 weeks before the event, warning people there was going to be a major event. So ITS is already paying dividends in our region. Made a huge difference this last year. But you had to learn from the first year, because we hadn't done anything of that nature in, 20 years, 30 years? Since there'd been a major event, a really major event of that nature, because I think we had about 80,000 the first year in over 2 days. Nobody was prepared for that. I mean, nobody was prepared for that with all the planning. They're opening up additional exits and entrances in Pease last year and this year, but that all works together. It's some of it's manual, some of it's electronic. Very, very successful. And I think open road tolling is going to be even more valuable in terms of the show, because you're going to have real spikes and peaks in that. So when you put all of that together, and then when you can communicate that information through ITS so that we can see it,